Thanks for joining once again for the TechSpective Podcast. I have with me Ajit Sancheti from CrowdStrike. Ajit, you've been on before, but for those who don't know, if you want to give a little bit of background on yourself.
Hi, Tony. Good to be back again. I'm Ajit Sancheti. I run the next-gen SIM business for CrowdStrike, and I'm glad to be back. I think we spoke last fall, if I remember correctly, Tony.
Sounds about right. And obviously a lot's changed, a lot stayed the same. I kind of wanted to have you back to basically kind of continue the conversation based on what's changed since you were last on. But we've talked about SIM, we've talked about SOAR, we've talked about how AI impacts those things. Before we get into that, let me ask you this: in your opinion, what is it about traditional SOAR solutions that have made it challenging? Like, why have traditional SOAR solutions struggled when it comes to a meaningful adoption in a SOC?
That's a good question, right? So if you look at what's in a traditional SOAR solution, there's a content library, there's case management, there's integrations, authoring of workflows, and just the orchestration of workflows. So whenever you think about adding a SOAR into your security operations, it's a big job. There's so much that you need to do to make it all work. And it generally tends to be inflexible and tends to be brittle. Meaning, one, if you want to change something, it's very hard to change. And two, if something changes, it does break. And so in the age of AI, those have all become limitations. Now you need very flexible workflows. You need workflows that can respond automated. You should be able to respond with a human in the loop, all because the attackers are moving faster and your response actions have to be both granular, precise, and have to be able to protect the enterprise. So when you start thinking about those things, the current SOAR is found wanting. And that's why people are thinking about it. And really, when compared to the 9 months ago when we talked about it, one of the changes, we're all talking about agentic AI. It's really more of a maturation of our initial AI, generative AI story, but it's a more maturation of it. Yeah.
Well, there's an element there that I want to get to, and maybe we'll get to it later. I don't want to jump straight there, but there is an element to consider there, and I've had this conversation with multiple people on this podcast and elsewhere about just the earned trust that has to come with that. That like agentic AI is depending on how much you give it. That's a big leap to say that I'm going to allow. Because even traditionally, like one of the hangups moving from SIM to SOAR was sort of okay, how much do I want to let go? Like, how much am I going to allow this SOAR to automate? And am I willing to live with the repercussions of bad decisions by this SOAR?
So two things to consider if you want to build more confidence and move faster. One is you need to get more granular responses, meaning the response actions itself need to be very, very targeted and precise, so I don't do a denial of service to all my users. If I want to hit one user, do I hit a network segment? Do I hit just the user's credentials and block them from doing what they were doing? That's one. The second is the ability to learn from what other actions have taken place in the past for a similar kind of threat. Now, you don't have 3 weeks, 4 weeks to learn those kinds of response actions because attackers are moving fast, you're moving fast. So if you have a large corpus of data, which is why now security has become a data problem, right? If you have a large corpus of data, then you can be very confident that the response actions you take have worked for a large number of other customers or other enterprises like yours. So you can do it. You have more tools at your disposal, but you need to have the ability to be able to respond at that granular level.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, this is not a direct comparison, but I think it's a fair analogy. If I look at, I've used Microsoft Outlook forever, and they introduced their concept of like the focused inbox, and you've got the things that filter to junk mail, and those things as well. There is a learning curve, like when you first start using it, you do have to really pay attention to, okay, did it put this in the focused inbox or did it put it in the not focused inbox? Did it funnel that email from Ajit to my junk mail. And so you do have to be the human in the loop to say, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to look, and then you train it. I mean, you basically say, look, the email from Ajit is not junk. Don't do that. That goes over here. And it does learn over time, so I mean, and every once in a while it still makes mistakes. I mean, like if it's, maybe it's an email from a new source and it gets funneled to junk mail. I mean, that happens still periodically. I think the baseline technology, the baseline system has improved over time, but there is always still some element of, okay, maybe it just based on the criteria that it's looking at, something still seems a little bit odd, and it says, you know what, that's junk, and it's not. And then I have to go in and say, well, let me tell you that that's not junk. So from now on, don't do that.
Right.
And I feel like that's a similar thing to what we have to do with the agentic AI. Like you can give it some latitude to make decisions, but you do have to go back in and review and say, okay, well, what decisions did it make? And then say, okay, yes, that was fine. Yes, that was fine. No, that was a bad decision. Don't do that. And then hopefully over time, you don't have to keep telling it that. Like it'll learn how to do that properly in the future.
Yeah. So I don't think that's ever going to go away, but at least I'm talking about in a reasonable time frame.
Right.
It's always going to be that human in the loop, but you're also going to find that agentic AI is going to be so focused on the different workflows that it does that it'll get better and better very quickly. So, for example, if you have a agentic response action AI agent that does just response actions, it's going to get better at response actions. You have one for just detection triage to understand detections. It's probably going to be, initially it'll start out by being, good at doing something on the endpoint, maybe something to do with identities. At some point, you're going to combine all of it. Sometimes you're going to combine it with cloud activity, your network activity. So we're going to start adding more and more complexities to agentic AI agents. As we add more and more capabilities, we're going to increase the confidence level in the responses. It's not just going to go be a 0 to 100, where we say, well, take all this input, and we know you're the best at detection triage, so go off and do it. We're going to keep adding more and more data sources for triage. We're going to add more and more complexity when it comes to doing incident management. Again, I think you and I talked about this, right? We want in the first phase to take away a lot of the tier 1 work.
Right.
And then you start adding more and more complexity. So the human in the loop is going to be there for a while. Tier 3, let's see how much of it becomes automated right away. Over time, it will be, but there's a step-by-step approach we are going to take.
Well, and I think too, agentic AI falls into this kind of a weird category in that we're talking about a technology. We're talking about implementing a technology in your network or on your devices, et cetera. But we're giving it roles and responsibilities similar to a human employee. So it's a technology, but it's also an employee. And I think you kind of have to look at it a little bit of both ways. And like if I hired someone to work in the SOC, even if they have years of experience and based on their resume, based on the interview, everything, like I fully expect this person to know what they're doing, and to be able to make the right decisions. As the hiring manager, though, I am still going to monitor that. Like I'm not just going to be like, all right, you're hired, go, just do whatever you want. And I feel like agentic AI is kind of the same. It's like, well, there's an earned trust, and then even after that trust is earned, there's still oversight. Nobody just hires an employee and lets them like run off and just do whatever they want, and they never check back in. Like you still have to look every once in a while and say, well, are you doing the thing that I'm paying you to do? And I feel like that we have to treat agentic AI in a similar fashion.
Yeah, you don't, like you said, earn trust, right? You don't earn trust in an overnight. You earn trust over time. And there will be the concept of an AI agent audit for the longest time, because you're going to go back. You're not just looking at the current incident, how are you responding to it? You're also going to go back and look and see, what did the agent do in the past? Was that optimal? Was it not? So the audit of the agent is just going to be like your performance review. that we do every few months or every half a year or every year. You're going to do the same things that you do for your humans. In many ways, you're going to do that for these agents, even though they're very narrow in what they do and they're very quick at what they do. You're still going to have to figure out whether they're working the way you thought they will work for you. And everything goes back to, is this tied to your business process or not, right? How important is it? Is it effective? Is it not effective? Do you need humans? Do you need less human? Do you need more human? These are all questions we will answer.
Yeah, but it's funny to me because it's a little bit like how compliance. I've always looked at compliance. I view it from a cybersecurity centric lens. So whether I'm talking about HIPAA or PCI or SOCs or whatever, I'm looking at it from the what are the controls, what are the requirements from a security perspective. And one day I had this epiphany of, the compliance mandate is bigger than that. Like there's a lot of stuff in HIPAA or in PCI that's like goes beyond cybersecurity. It goes beyond technology, and so it's multifaceted within the organization. There are things that the legal team needs to be involved in. There are things that the HR team needs to be involved in. There are things that IT needs to be involved in versus cybersecurity, and so it's not just one thing. And I feel like this kind of falls in that same thing again, where it's like, well, yes, we're going to deploy this, agentic AI, and that seems at face value like an IT thing. It's I'm deploying software in the network, so this is an IT function. But because of what it does and how it does it, you really need you need everyone on board. You need different teams looking at it from different lenses. And if I'm deploying printers, then that's primarily really just an IT thing. Like you deploy the printers, it's the IT team's job to make sure they're running, make sure the toner's good, to fix them if they're broken. But when we're talking about agentic AI, it's like, okay, well now I do need the legal team to know what's going on, and I don't know if it's not really an HR thing per se, but there does need to be management oversight of what is the agent doing.
There will be, but let's not forget, right? We're talking in the context of security. HR is building its own agents. Legal is building its own agents. So now you have to make sure that all of them are getting the data they expect in the way they can make the decisions that you're expecting them to make. So we are heading for some real complexity in ensuring that this workflow works not just for security, but works for everybody else in the organization. And it'll be interesting to see how oversight comes about. Right now, the way human organizations are set up, we have expertise, right? You have a legal team that has its expertise from its leader down, the general counsel all the way down, and security operations team, the CISO all the way down. So we are going to have to figure out what level you have to start to make trade-offs. And there are always going to be trade-offs between a business process, between a security decision, between what HR needs. And so it'll all come about. I think what most of the security vendors have started to do is to focus on the ones that are very narrowly focused on security before looking at the ones that interplay and interface with other organizations, which is fine because you still have so much work to be done just in the SOC. The thing we talked about, if I remember correctly, was about the swivel chair syndrome. You had like 3 or 4 different interfaces, different places where the data was. We brought the data together. Now we can take actions faster. We can automate all those actions. They're still in the context of security before we start thinking in the context of the entire, what happens when HR has to get involved, what happens when legal has to get involved. Still a lot of work to be done.
Okay. One of the things that, I know that you have kind of been an advocate and evangelist for, security automation should be radically simple. It should be, simpler and more human friendly. What does that look like in practice? Like, how do we go about making sure that security is human friendly and simplify it?
So the first thing you do is first put the data in one place where somebody can go look at it. But then after that, you have to start building solutions for the occasional user. So what that means is you have to be able to use natural language. You should be able to ask questions and get answers back. You shouldn't have to be an expert in this language. You need to get the query right. You need to put the right operator. You need to figure out that you didn't cause the system to go off into an infinite loop. All of those require expertise. The first and probably the most important thing is getting everything in natural language. You should be able to ask simple questions, get simple answers. One way we've tried to do it, rather than, and I'm not doing a product pitch here, is we have this thing called Agentic response. One of the things it does is it gets the response back and then tells you, here's 3 or 4 things that we believe you should do next as you look at this threat. It's great because it's in human readable form. It doesn't require you to be an expert, but it is the way we can start to get more people security aware and able to take actions faster. So if you had to do one thing, just make it simple, make it human readable, human conversational kind of interfaces.
Yeah. Well, and so it's interesting, when you're talking about the not having to get the query exactly right and stuff, what occurs to me, and I'm dating myself here, is early PC days. I remember playing like King's Quest or Leisure Suit Larry. The interactive games.
Yeah.
And a lot of time the challenge I had wasn't that I didn't know what to do. It was that the game had such a limited vocabulary that you didn't know. You didn't just have to know what to do. You had to know what specific word it was looking for to make that thing happen. So you might be asking, and you could use 10 different synonyms for the same thing, but it's like, well, I only understand this word, and I feel like that's a lot of what generative AI and kind of the natural language aspect gets us around is, I don't have to just know, what is the exact one right way to phrase this query. I can just ask the question, and hopefully the generative AI is good enough to understand the nuance of what I'm asking.
Well, that's a great example. Also, the fact that generative AI sometimes, not always, but most of the time, can also ask a clarifying question. Says, is this your intent? At least, gets you pretty far without being frustrated after an hour of, why did I do this and why did I do it wrong? We've come a long way.
Yeah.
It's gotten so much to the point where we have all these great tools. We're moving fast. We're trying to get things done. We're trying to be effective. We're trying to get the right outcomes. And at the same time, attackers are doing the same exact thing. They have better tools. They're getting better outcomes. We are having to respond faster. So,
right.
It hasn't been a one-way street.
Yeah, right, and honestly, it never will be. I actually had the conversation / realization, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. I was talking with someone, doing an interview where we were talking about the perpetual, why is it that year after year after year, we would say, there'd come a report that would say security spending is up 25%. And then the next day there'd be a report that attacks are up 30%. The financial impact of attacks is up 35% or whatever. And so we were like, well, what are we doing? Like, why are we spending more money every year and yet we're doing just as bad or worse often, year to year? And I don't remember who it was, but whoever I was talking to was like, well, you're not. That's not an apples to apples comparison because everything is constantly evolving. So the attack surface is changing, the attack surface is expanding. And so just because you spent more than you did, if you were spending more than you did last year on security and the attack surface was static, you would expect better results.
Yeah, that's a problem. Yes, if you didn't get better results, that's a problem. Just in the last few years, we've gone from malware heavy attacks to identity, credential heavy attacks. Identities become so much more important. And there was a time when malware was a majority of how attackers got into organizations. That's not even the case anymore. The attack surface will continue to evolve. It's just like fighting a battle, a many-front battle, like any classic army does. You're just fighting that. It's just that you're an enterprise. You're trying to get your business done, and you have all these different kinds of threat vectors that you have to deal with, and they're never going to stop. What we will see, and you're probably seeing this also, is in the era of agentic AI, how attackers will try to leverage those agents against you. And how do you ensure that that doesn't happen, right? So those are the kinds of guardrails that we're all building to make sure that whenever you think about agentic AI, how you can ensure security of the agents themselves. And you don't want that to be turned against you.
Yeah, well, and going back many years, again dating myself, like I remember back in like the Code Red days, the SQL Slammer days.
Oh boy, yes.
Being, obviously, I mean, on SQL Slammer, I spent like the entire weekend on the phone doing support, trying to work through everything. But then I would also kind of step back and have a level of respect is the wrong word, because it's like it's bad guys doing bad things. But you look at it and you go, that was a really innovative, creative way you did that. And I mean, many times I would step back and say, if only these people would use their ingenuity for good, because it was obviously they have some skills and they have some creativity. Just put it to good use.
It's the story of humanity.
Yeah, but I mean, really, no matter what we come up with, there's always going to be someone out there who will come up with a creative way around it, or a creative way to use it against you. I mean, I've long said, and Mikko Hyppinen just wrote the book recently, If It's Smart, It's Vulnerable. And I've said forever that, like, anything that makes things easier or more convenient for you is also a tool for the bad guy. Either it's a tool they can also use to make things easier for them, or it's something that just is a vector they can use against you. So pretty much everything we do to evolve the process for ourselves also just expands the attack surface and changes things so that it gives the attackers more tools to work with at the same time.
Yeah, that's why you have, the evil genius, right? The evil genius. And you have a whole series of James Bond films where the Bond villain's always very clever, very intelligent, trying to leverage your tools against you. It's going to continue to happen. What we're trying to now build in is more flexibility into how enterprises can respond, because we realize that attackers are also moving fast. So AI agents are actually a good way to get that to happen, because they tend to be a lot more flexible than previous tools that we had. So they give you a little bit more ability to respond and change the nature of your response based on the threat itself. So I think, at least in that respect, we're going to get a better set of outcomes for customers. It's probably for the first time we're getting that kind of automated intelligence built into solutions.
Yeah. Well, so it's always been a bit of a, and this is a well-worn analogy, but it's always been a cat and mouse game of, every time we come up with the defense, they come up with a new attack, we come up with a better defense, they come up with a better attack, and back and forth we go. Now we say, okay, well, here comes AI. We can use AI to defend better, but the attackers can also use AI to attack better.
Yes.
Now we're gonna go to agentic AI, where we say, okay, well, now let's just automate it. We'll let the AI automatically defend us. But the attackers can do that too. So quickly we get to a point where, like, we're all just sitting at our desks watching the AIs fight each other.
Oh, yeah. We'll see how that plays out. I'm a lot more confident, only because I think that the agents themselves, if you build them right, gives you a lot more flexibility than you did in the past. One thing that we're noticing that's interesting is organizations that in the past did not look at a security operations like a SIM solution because they felt they were too small. They're realizing the value of it now, because even when they are small, relatively small, not very small, relatively small, they're buying the next-gen SIM from CrowdStrike, because they're also realizing that combining all the data, putting it in one place, is giving them a lot more intelligence and insights that they did not have in the past, because it was hard to manage, or it took time to make it work. All of those things. So now we're starting to see more organizations doing that, and I think that itself, it goes back to the if you can make many things more and more secure, it becomes harder for attackers to get through. I think more enterprises are getting smarter about how they're doing that, and that'll just make us a lot more secure than we were in the past. It's just, I'm optimistic only because I'm looking at the data and how people are starting to adopt security technologies. I think it's good. It's a good thing.
Well, I definitely think it's a good thing. Like you're talking about smaller organizations. So it's like, yeah, I mean, if I'm a small, whatever, I'm a 50-person startup, that I don't know, that builds widgets. I'm not even in technology or cybersecurity per se. Like I don't have the in-house expertise. I don't have the resources to build and deploy a SIM properly. Right, I don't have the resources to manage that properly. And yes, we've had, MSPs, we've had, managed response. I can hire out for those things, but the advent of generative AI and agentic AI really democratizes the whole thing and brings down the level of, okay, I can deploy this tool. I don't need to be a security expert to deploy and manage this tool. And you talked about the ability of generative AI to ask sort of follow-up questions, and it's like one of the things that I think is pretty cool is the way that the different tools will use. I liken it to I think the first example I could think of was old school Netflix, back when they were actually shipping DVDs. But also Amazon does it too. But like if I rent this movie and it says, oh well, people who rent that movie also have rented these movies. Maybe you want to look at those. Amazon might say, well, you know what? People who buy that also often buy these other things to go with it or whatever. And it gives you those alternate suggestions. And I think generative AI often does a lot of that same thing where it says, you know what, people who ask that question often want to know these things too. So here's some suggested questions. Would you like to know those things? And I think that's very helpful for someone who is not a cybersecurity professional, because a cybersecurity professional would say, okay, well, I already know what I want to ask. But someone who's not a cybersecurity professional would, you can look at those questions and go, oh, I didn't even know that was a question I could ask. But yes, let's ask that.
I think that's the phrase that you use, right? The democratization of security is definitely happening. We're seeing it everywhere because more and more enterprises are deploying it because they know they have more tools and they don't have to put people to leverage those tools. So it's a trend in the right direction. Agentic AI is here. We'll just have to make sure that we do it right. You'll make sure that the outcomes are well thought through, the response actions are well done. To your point at the beginning, you said, right, how do I make sure I'm doing the right thing when I'm allowing it to do something? And those are the things we're all going to focus on. AI agents need to be smart, authoring needs to be good, audit and oversight needs to be well thought through, and the outcomes will definitely be better.
And inevitably, like I will all but guarantee this, inevitably, there will be some pretty massive, like catastrophic AI failure. Like there was the thing a few weeks back where it deleted the production database of whatever company or whatever. That story was going around. There will be some incident that happens where agentic AI makes a decision and really screws some things up on a massive scale. And the thing is, that's going to get a lot of attention. It's going to make a lot of headlines. But it's also a little bit it's a little bit of a distraction. It's misleading because and I hate to give any credit at all to Elon Musk, but he did once upon a time point out when it comes to self-driving cars, is like, look, every time a Tesla gets in an accident, it makes global news. And everyone thinks, oh, well, that's unsafe because it got in an accident. And he's like, meanwhile, 10,000 other cars driven by humans have gotten into accidents on that same day, right, at the same time, and nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention to that. And I feel like that we're going to have to work through that with AI too, because something's going to happen and everyone's going to say, well, see, it's bad, it's horrible. Nobody should trust agentic AI because look at this bad thing that happened. And meanwhile, you can go, okay, yes, but at the same time, 10,000 other security breaches happened that had nothing to do with agentic AI.
Yeah, I think, it's this fear, right, for people. It's the fear of something new that does things. So we're going to have to be careful about how we respond. If it's a mature response, it acknowledges what the shortcomings were, figures out how to solve it, I don't think we have a problem. And if that's it's the nature of any new technology, especially technology that's so differentiated than the past. So we just have to be careful about how we respond, and people will trust you if you're doing the right thing, right? We'll see. There will be bad actors. There will be haphazard responses that won't serve the greater good. But I think companies that are responding maturely will do just fine, and we will have to respond maturely.
Yeah, and I think maturely and clearly and expeditiously. I think that's
Right.
a lot of it. Is like when incidents happen, whether it's cybersecurity related or just whatever, like just a company incident. Part of crisis management is that transparency. It is getting ahead of the messaging and saying, look, this is what happened. We're going to explain what happened, what we know about how it happened, what we're doing to make sure it doesn't happen again. But it's the companies that try to deflect or bury it who I think that cause the problems. Where it's like that undermines the trust.
Yeah, and that's kind of how we've thought about the AI native SOC, and everything that we're doing is how do you build in controls, how do you build in safeguards, how do you make sure that customers have transparency and visibility into what you're doing. So we'll have to do the right thing for what we do, and everybody else will count on them doing what they need to do in their respective industries. It's an evolving space, but it's an exciting time, because even since the time you and I spoke, which is just 9 months ago, so much has happened with agentic AI that was not even true then. It was more about generative AI at the time, and now we're talking more about agentic AI. So who knows, when we talk next, what else there will be on the horizon?
Yeah, well, and and I've had conversations on this podcast in recent episodes about there have been examples of companies. I think Google did it, and different companies have rolled out at least prototypes of saying, hey, we can have these agents that like in your mobile device or whatever, that will just know that you like the band Maroon 5. Maroon 5 is going to be in town on October 15th. It'll check your calendar and say, oh, well, hey, you're free on October 15th, and it'll go ahead and buy you tickets and be like, here's your tickets. And on some level, it's like having a human executive assistant who has the autonomy to say, okay, I know what you like, I know what your calendar is, I know your financial situation, and I can make all these things happen. And it's been presented by a couple different vendors as like, hey, look how cool this is. And I'm like, okay, on some level that's cool, but also you're asking for a lot of trust. You're asking me for me to let agentic AI, you're asking me to let this AI agent have full access to my calendar, full access to my bank account, make plans on my behalf, and all that. And it's like, on the one hand, that sounds a little bit insane today. I'm not sure I would trust any agent with that level of access.
It might be normal tomorrow.
What I was going to say, but on the other hand, when I think of the Tony Stark Jarvis future or the Star Trek kind of future, it's like, well, no, that also seems like what we're supposed to be working towards. Like that is the goal.
On that note, I think that brings up so many more possibilities. Well, even when you just look at how we think about security, the getting customers to build confidence that they can automate some is going to be hard. But I think after that, the steps will be a lot easier, because if the data is very, very powerful and convincing, I think customers will leverage automation more. Getting the human out of the loop, it's going to be a while.
Yeah. Well, and going back to the beginning of this conversation, I feel like there's an evolution that will have to happen of having more trust and kind of relinquishing more to agentic AI to say, okay, I trust agentic AI to do this, and this, go. And over time, the human might be involved in less of that.
Right.
But also over time, I feel like it creates the need for this entire new class of job, like that you mentioned, which is sort of like agentic AI auditor. Like someone has to be still paying attention. Like even if we relinquished full control and we said, okay, we now trust this, we fully trust this, go just do what you do. Someone still has to go look at that every once in a while, weekly, quarterly, something, and just make sure that it's still on the right path.
That's not going to go away. We still have to do performance reviews.
Well, and so I'll go back to what I said about it is a weird gray area, because like you still have to treat it like an employee.
Right.
You have to treat it like it's not just a technology, like like the light fixture in your office, where it's like, okay, it's installed, it just does what it does. You turn on the light switch, it works. You don't need to send someone up there every 3 months to make sure the wire is still attached. Agentic AI isn't like that. Like you do have to do performance reviews. You do have to kind of like look at that every once in a while and say, are you still doing what I need you to be doing? And make sure it's on the right path.
Yeah, under the current circumstances, it's almost like, you're giving some intelligence, you're expecting intelligence, and that requires you to be able to say, okay, is this the right thing or not? It's not a static workflow.
Well, so given the change that you've seen, since we last spoke 9 months ago, and the current state of what you're working on, if you look ahead, I don't know, 12 months, 24 months, what do you predict will be the biggest change in how security automation is designed or deployed or measured?
Yeah, I think the most important is going to be the AI agents. And AI agents, initially, when we think about it in the context of response actions and SOAR. But AI agents are showing up for data ingest, they're showing up for detection triage, they're showing up for investigations, search, threat hunting. So what we're seeing is many of these agents with very, very targeted outcomes coming together. And then you're going to have to find ways to put them together in the AI SOC, the AI native SOC that we talk about. It's going to have to all come together. So we have to be able to make sure that these things are orchestrated right. Then you start talking about audit, like we talked about just now. How do you make sure that these things are doing the right thing? So if you look at the coming 12 to 24 months, it's going to be lots of different agents. How do you make sure they're doing the right thing? How do you ensure that they're getting the outcomes? What does the human in the loop do? What is the audit? What are your solutions telling you about the effectiveness of these agents? So we're going to be spending time on those kinds of things, all while making sure that we morph and we adapt to what the adversaries are doing. Ultimately, they are the ones we want to protect against. So I don't see any change I think the big changes are already happening when it comes to AI native SOC and AI agents. The agentic AI platforms are definitely becoming more and more of a reality. You can see outcomes, you can see things. I mean, we have them in many places for our customers. It's amazing the kinds of outcomes you see. Effectiveness, people are measuring effectiveness. We've shown in some cases the effectiveness is over 98% against what a human would do. Those are good numbers this early.
Okay. For companies out there, security leaders out there listening, what advice, what are some steps that people should be taking today to ensure that their SOC is ready for an AI-driven future?
Yeah, the first thing is to make sure that you have all the data very normalized and in one place, right? I think regardless of how you do it, you need to have all of your data in one place. You need to have it normalized and interpretable, meaning you're doing the same thing for incident management, for threat hunting, for your dashboards, as you're doing for your investigations and as you're doing for your security operations and SOAR. If the data is in different places, I think that the AI agents are not going to be as effective for you, because now you have to figure out whether they're all looking at the same data and getting you the same outcomes. So if you do a good job of getting your data in one place, then you can start thinking about your agentic AI strategy. And for agentic AI, I would start definitely with the SOAR, with the response actions, trying to figure out how to take automated actions. That's probably the best place to start. Of course, you're going to get the ability to do threat hunting and data ingest and all of that. But response actions and threat investigations is probably the best place to start your agentic AI journey.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that pretty much answers my questions. Like I had another one that revolved around lessons from your experience and how that would shape how you think about the future of automation. But I feel like we've covered that a couple different ways. Coming up on the horizon, you've got Falcon. And I don't want you to give away anything with that per se. It's early. I'm sure I will have those conversations with people at CrowdStrike as well. But I guess I will just use this opportunity, since this will come out before then, to just kind of pitch that for anyone out there, like take a look at going to Falcon if you've got the time on your calendar.
Yeah, no, thank you for doing that. Falcon's coming up next week. It's got 8,000 registered attendees. We've got thousands of people who will be on digitally. It's sold out, unfortunately. But
all right, well, never mind. Everyone, put your calendars away.
But it's going to be amazing. We've got so many great sessions. A lot of announcements that I can't talk about that'll be coming up. It's going to be a fun week next week in Las Vegas. And we're looking forward to those who can make it. We're looking forward to seeing you all there.
Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. You're welcome back anytime. You don't have to wait another 9 months if you don't want.
Tony, you're always a great pleasure to talk with.
All right. Take care and have fun in Vegas.
Thanks.